Hello, wildlings. I'm your Creepsmith, and you found my Fear Forge. Lucky you.
Tonight's career catastrophe. I took a factory job. Not quite sure what's going on here. By the nefarious Mr. Outlaw. I never should have dropped out of college. The difference between a Zuckerberg and myself is, well, it's astronomical, but I was delusional enough to think otherwise. I wasn't completely hopeless, though. I had an idea of what I wanted to become, but that's irrelevant here. This is the story of how I ended up at the factory. I was living by myself in San Antonio at the time. My folks were kind enough to give me a bit of moving out cash, and I was also working part-time during school. That's how I'd been sustaining myself. But as much as I loved them, there was no way in hell that I was moving back in. That just was not an option. After taking up a few temporary stints around the city, the bills started piling up. In addition to that, I'd also been fired from my part-time. Not that it mattered too much, I was making peanuts there. I started looking everywhere, trying to secure another steady source of income, but that turned out to be quite the process. As my bills started stacking, so did my rejection emails. At first, I was just being selective, trying to land something that was considerably higher than the minimum wage. That was just wishful thinking. In the end, I decided to settle for a $9 an hour gig at a local restaurant, but then I found something better. A lot better. It was a singular flyer taped to the side of a bus stop shelter. I looked it over and was put into a state of absolute incredulity. We're looking for some hardworking individuals to help out at our new factory. Starting rates of $21 per hour. Please email or give us a call if you think you're up to the task. No previous warehouse experience required. That last line got me. No fucking experience needed. Now, if I were smarter, I could have seen where this was going. If something is too good to be true, you know the rest. But I suppose the desperate times don't only yield desperate measures. They also make you disregard the concept of reality. I decided to give them a call later that day. I thought it would show more initiative than merely sending an email. I don't know. After a few rings, a younger-sounding woman picked up. "Hello, this is the Dolus Company. Marie speaking. How may I help you today?" I tried to do a quick recollection in my head. Had I ever heard about a company called Dolus? No, I hadn't. But it's not like I'd know about every company in the States, so this wasn't an immediate cause for concern, or so I thought. The phone call went surprisingly well. A bit too well, but hey, desperate times. We set up an interview for the following day around 9 in the morning. Things were looking up. That morning, I drove out to the factory address. It was kind of on the outskirts of town, but that wasn't the biggest problem. It was only a 25-minute drive, and there was little traffic on the way there. I suppose you could call the place medium-sized, as far as factories go. I mean, I haven't seen too many of them in real life, so it's hard to make an apt comparison. It was located to the side of a narrow road right next to two large cornfields. I parked in the lot adjoining the road, which was about 3/4 full, got out of my car, straightened my tie, and slicked back my hair one more time before walking in. The lady had told me to go into the manager's office, which was apparently located to the left of the entrance as soon as I walked in. I found it easily enough. The door was closed, so I knocked. And knocked. I must have stood out there for a good 5 minutes, but nobody answered. At first, that is. Assuming that the guy was simply late, I took a seat on the chair directly parallel to the door. However, I was surprised when I started hearing movement coming from inside. It sounded like the shuffling of feet along with multiple hushed voices conversing. Eventually, the door opened up and I was met by a tall, bulky man dressed less casually than I was. He shook my hand and kindly introduced himself as Winston. When I walked into his office, I had realized that it was only the two of us in there. I could have sworn I heard someone else, but maybe not. I contemplated asking about it for the briefest moment, but then decided there was no benefit to doing so. We sat down, and he began asking me some questions. Most of them were regarding my physical strength and endurance, and I was in pretty good shape at the time myself. That was evident from my not-so-subtle wardrobe choices, so those were no problem. In fact, everything seemed fine about the whole process. No red flags just yet, aside from the bizarre delay in the time it took him to open the door for me. Well, I was supposed to come in at 7 a.m. that very next day. Early start, but beggars can't be choosers. It was a generic place, with assembly line production and heavy machinery sprawled across the wide concrete floors. I was given a rundown of exactly what I would be doing and how to do it. The factory's production was mostly focused on vehicle accessories, like trailer hitches. However, my job was even easier than I initially thought it was going to be. Since I had a forklift license, all I had to do was transport materials from one end of the factory to the other. It was hardly strenuous, and for the first few days I had estimated that I was only actually spending about 2.5 hours a shift driving back and forth. The other 5.5 simply comprised of waiting around for somebody to finish sealing the shipping boxes. I actually managed to get a hefty amount of reading in, which was great for me. But I doubt you want to hear about all of this. To summarize, the job was a cakewalk for the first few weeks. The only peculiar thing that I'd really noticed was the fact that a lot of other workers rarely ever spoke to me or even to each other. My social interactions were mostly limited to the two other guys that had also recently hired on, Chad and Sergio. They were chill enough, and our conversations were about as normal as you could expect for 3 dudes in their early 20s working at a factory. It was during the 3rd week where the first, interesting occurrences began to manifest. I was doing my usual rounds when I noticed that one of the assembly line workers was sitting absolutely still. Now, I expected workers to take breaks, of course. They were human after all, but this woman simply wasn't moving. I observed her apparent detachment as vehicle lighting fixtures slowly moved past her. The bizarre part was that her posture remained impeccable throughout all of it. I slowly drifted towards her, trying to get a glimpse of what she might have been looking at. As I made my way past her, it looked to me as if she was simply staring at a spot on the wall parallel to her. I took a quick glance over, but I couldn't locate anything worth staring at. I mean, it was just a wall. After a few moments of contemplation, I came to the conclusion to leave it. I mean, we all zone out sometimes, don't we? If that doesn't sound particularly strange to you, I can guarantee you this encounter was only scratching the surface. After that, a few days had gone by in which nothing noteworthy occurred, but then I saw him for the first time. An individual which I only describe as the Suit. I was taking one of my breaks when he appeared at the top of the stairs connecting to the next floor. Now, I was instructed never to go up there. Winston had told me that there would be no situation where I would ever need to, so I had no idea what was actually on the floor above us. He was a tall, somewhat wiry man wearing a three-piece dark blue suit, or maybe it was light black. To be honest, I couldn't tell for sure. On the surface, this would have been a nothing situation. He was probably just a supervisor or something. But what kind of supervisor wears a face mask? I mean, the guy was wearing a plain black face mask with what looked like black goggles over the top. Black gloves as well. And from the bits of exposed skin that I did see, it was evident that he was pale. Extremely pale. I looked up at him in moderate bewilderment, trying to gauge who he was supposed to be. I nearly had a heart attack when Winston grasped my shoulder, pulling my gaze away from the suit. "Hey, Jeff, you keeping busy?" "Yeah, I'm just waiting for the next set of boxes to transport." Great. In the meantime, you could probably help them pack it all in. Keeps everything moving nice and steady." Yeah, sure." He gave me a smile before inching past me and walking off. I looked back up, only to see the suit walking back through wherever he'd come from. I also saw Winston making a beeline toward the stairs, climbing them with a haste I'd never seen him operate at before. In fact, his movements looked almost angry. He went the same way that the suit did, and I didn't see him again that entire day. Now, obviously some questions were raised here, like who the hell that guy was and why Winston seemed to be so intent on having me not see him. But I was not gonna ask. For some reason, it just didn't seem like a good idea. I decided to simply keep my head down and do my damn job. Whatever was really going on, I wasn't about to get involved with it. As the day was ending, and I was preparing to clock out, one of the janitors nudged me as I walked by him. "Excuse me?" I muttered in surprise. Keeping his voice extremely low, he whispered to me, "Did he look at you?" I was lost for a second, but only a second. It was pretty obvious who he was talking about. "No, I don't think so." The janitor just nodded at this. "Okay, just don't look at him again, all right?" I tried asking him some more about it, but he simply told me that he was busy and he couldn't talk. Okay, what the hell was going on here? Well, those were the first few weeks. I still don't know what the woman was staring at or who the suit is, but hopefully I'm never going to find out. I've read stories like this, and they never end well. Update. Alright, you know how I said I was going to lay low? Well, yeah, nothing ever goes perfectly, does it? Since one of the other forklift drivers had called in sick on a night shift, I had to fill his place. The shift itself was from midnight to 8 a.m. Extremely inconvenient hours, but it also paid 25% more, so I didn't complain. In addition to that, there were considerably fewer workers, which consequently meant less work to actually do. I was probably on the forklift for maybe 10 minutes out of every hour. The day was so slow that Winston decided to have me do an inventory in a back room. Easy enough. I was just supposed to count bumpers. But the room itself, that left something to be desired. The floors were cracked and dusty, while the only source of illumination came from a few incandescent bulbs dangling precariously above me. Is what it is, I thought to myself. Before I started counting, I decided to take a look around the place. There was a single locked door to one side, as well as a window set on the other wall. The room that window led to was presumably pitch black because I couldn't see anything through it. I didn't realize how bizarre this really was until about, 10 minutes in. There was a window in the wall, but no door leading into the room. Not unless the door on the other side was connected, but that would have led to a very large room. Oddly shaped, too. I went back over to the window and tried looking through it again, mostly out of sheer curiosity. It was so dark, it honestly could have been completely covered and I wouldn't even have noticed. After about 2 minutes of intense staring, a knock from behind me made me jump. At first, I thought it had come from the entrance, but that was wide open and there was nobody there. There was only one other door in the room. 3 more heavy, rhythmic knocks rang through, confirming that it was indeed coming from the locked door. At that moment, I really didn't know what to do, so I froze. 3 more knocks. But there was another sound as well, almost like tapping on the glass. I turned around, catching what I could only assume was a hand pressed on the window for just a split second. I just made up the inventory numbers right then and there and left the room after that. I'm not gonna quit just yet. The chances of a better opportunity in this area popping up somewhere else is slim. I'll just tough it out. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not really in any immediate danger. I mean, hell, it looks as if this factory's been open for years. Can't be that bad if people keep working here, right? Right? But, if anything else happens, I guess I'll take note of it. Thank you for listening, wildlings, and if you like this story, come back next time for the continuing travails of our intrepid chronicler. Until then, stay scary and make the most of your nights.